Hey everyone, Charlie here with Advent Tech, and today I'm going to talk about as quickly as I can why we say please do not buy a reseller warranty or what's sometimes called a third-party warranty. We are going to do math together, and I'm going to break down for you why companies like Advent Tech refuse to do a third-party or reseller warranty, not just for our safety, but for your safety as a customer. First, let's build a profile of what kind of company we find does these warranties. So let's start with just a average ed tech company. Let's say it's about $100 million per year. And these companies tend to be very device heavy, right? So when we talk about device heavy, what do we mean? We mean they're selling a lot of Chromebooks, a lot of low cost Windows devices. And typically for every $400 in revenue, that's probably one Chromebook for a company like this, because Chromebooks might cost $200, $250, maybe $300 for a nicer one. So this would be a company that's doing something in the range of 250,000 devices per year, right? And so with that, they might already be selling some warranties, but third-party warranties. Well, how does this company's finances typically look if they're not doing a third-party warranty? Well, they might have something like a 10% average margin on their deals, right? So where they maybe make $10 million a year after the cost of the services and shipping and cost of goods. But probably $7 million a year has to go into operating expenses, salaries. What they end up kind of left with, and this is an important number, is something like $3 million a year in profit, right? So that wouldn't be uncommon for a business like this to have something like $3 million a year in profit. So why would a business like this currently not doing third-party warranties be tempted to do third-party warranties? Well, let's look at the math. So let's say this business on average has something like a 40% warranty attach, right? And this is where they could start attaching their own warranty if they were so inclined. Typically what we see is they do like a 4-year, right? You got to be better than the manufacturer warranty, and you've got to be cost competitive as well, right? Because if you're going up against a more reliable, safer manufacturer warranty, right, or an insurance underwritten warranty, then you have to offer some kind of bargain. So this is what you might see. And I mean, I'm speaking from experience, having worked with companies that have done their own warranty plans and have sold manufacturer warranties. So if we start doing math here, right, we're talking about about 100,000 devices times $50, that ends up being, just to do some quick math, $5 million in profit per year, right? Like, man, that is very tempting, right? If you're a business owner, like if you were just making a measly $3 million a year on the business, and you could kick that up to 5 million more, 8 million total, like why wouldn't you do that, right? This is often where companies will even attract a buyer or investors, was when they start doing stuff like this, because the profitability goes up. But let's start talking about what happens to the cost of the operation as they do that. I'm going to say about 10% of the devices per year break down. How did I come up with that math? Well, it's an average over 4 years or even 5 years sometimes. I see these guys do 5-year warranties on Chromebooks and whatnot. And, 10% of the devices is obviously about, 10,000 devices. But they end up doing this same scenario year after year. So after 4 years, we're talking about, about 40,000 devices, right? So 40,000 devices that you have to fix, every year at this point. And the average cost is, I'm going to say, right around $75. Why do I say $75? It's like, well, you can get some of these parts for pretty cheap. The labor is not terribly expensive either, but there's the shipping that goes into it. Sometimes you do have to do a full replacement if you're going to honor your warranty, because it's just hard to find certain parts and supply. And there's also like just utility space, tools. I mean, there's an investment cost here to do this. I think in some ways that might even be a little conservative. But again, 10% devices per year, you do this multiple years in a row. And what you end up with is a bill every year that you kind of start with that is 40,000 devices times $75. It's $3 million per year. If that number sounds familiar, it's because it's the number we talked about up here. the actual business now is not profitable anymore, right? The cost to repair all these devices eats up all the profits, the normal profits of the business. But you say, hey, listen, Charlie, there's still this profit over here. So as long as they continue to sell more warranties to more customers the next year and next year, then the business remains profitable. I mean, it's almost just as profitable, maybe still more profitable than it was before they started doing their own warranties. So again, what is the problem? Well, the problem is this picture I painted is a very linear business that has no debt. All right. So, two problems here. And this is still a business that might look really good on paper to a private equity company to acquire because, like I said, they might still be pulling in $4 or $5 million a year in profit. And there's this customer retention thing too, where like your customer, you can't get away from us because we do your repairs. So, what's the problem? What am I scared of for you as a customer and as a business owner? Again, business is not linear like I've outlined here where they're going to get the same business every single year. What if one year 100,000 devices doubles, right? And you get 200,000 devices because all your customer renewals and Chromebook purchases all kind of landed on the same year, or there's a big influx of federal money or COVID relief money or something like that. And that feels really good and that feels really fun, and that only really kicks us up to, something like a 3.75. That's not exactly going to, cripple you or anything like that, right? And you had a really good year that year. But then the next year, you get half the sales, or you get 40% of the sales, or something like that. And why do I say that? It's like, well, the year before, if you doubled up, then that means the next year you could get significantly less just based on when customers do renewals, right? So let's say all of a sudden this, $100,000 that turns into, $200,000 one year. Well, that goes way back to something like, 50,000 the next year, right? And I'm still being generous. I'm saying they're still going to sell like 50,000 warranties, but they sell less devices, right? So this kind of gets cut in half. There's a cut here, right? Where now you're doing about half as much here. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, this 3 million can easily turn into, 1.5, and this 5 million can easily turn into, 2 to 2.5. And this is the bill that you're going to have. So now you only have $4 million a year in profit that you might have been making, right? Based on warranty sales and other margin. But your repair bill is 3.75, right? And I'm trying to be generous here and say that you could have a double year and then the next year still do 50% of the business. I mean, it could be a lot worse than that. But now what you've done is you've basically flattened out all the profit out of the business, right? What's scary about that is that could go for a couple years, right? You could have the next year, the numbers could be exactly the same. And a lot of times those profits that come into a company, they leave by way of capital expenditures or, employee raises, whatever, or the owners take money out and then it doesn't come back into the company per se. But if your business flattens out and suddenly it's not making much or any profit, all of a sudden you could have a real issue where the folks who loan you money to buy equipment could say, hey, we're going to really pull back on your credit lines. And this is in a perfect world where, again, this cost doesn't take a big hike, right? We're talking about how sales could go down after a banner year. Well, let's say this year that you doubled your sales, you also warrantied a bunch of 14-inch touchscreen Acer devices, which are way more expensive to repair. So now your repair cost has gone up to, $100 on average, and it's not times 40,000 devices a year, right? It's times 50,000 devices a year. So your repair cost isn't, 3.75 a year. Your repair cost now goes up to, $5 million a year. And you're like, well, hey, aren't you being a little negative there? Like, how often does that happen that parts cost or repair cost goes up dramatically? It just happened. Like through COVID, it just happened, which is why a number of these third-party repair warranty companies like shut down, because now the business is losing, right? Because we're still talking about profit here with this number, right? So the business maybe is making $4 million a year, losing $5 million a year. and the business becomes insolvent, really quickly. And the one last thing I want to mention is the fact that this business may have already had some debt. They may have borrowed for capital expenditures. They may have an investor that wants to be paid out within a certain amount of years. Or in the most scary scenario, and I'm not trying to pick on anybody in particular, but I'm going to go ahead and say this. In the most scary scenario, the company you're buying this warranty from is a private equity owned company. Why is that scary? Private equity company comes in, and when they take a look at this company, they often take a look at this company when they see it doing this. Yeah, these profits are getting eaten up here, but there's a $5 million a year plus in profitability. We're private equity. We're smart guys. What we'll do is we'll come in, we'll find ways to grow efficiencies and save money. And we will have to borrow to buy a $100 million company that does devices, warranties, stuff like that. They'll have to borrow, 50 to $70 million. And this is an educated guess, but I've got some experience here, in order to buy this business. And this is this is a loan that they have to pay back within 7 to 10 years, right? Let's just say on the generous side, they got a good deal. They only paid $50 million and they have 10 years to pay back the loan. That means every year they have to pay back $5 million of a loan. This is why private equity guys look at this and say, we're going to borrow all this money. It gets put against the business, the loan, by the way, and we can pay this bill out of these profits, and then we'll find a way to grow the company and make it bigger, more profitable. But when a private equity company comes in and buys a company, they have something like a $5 to $7 to $10 million a year loan, basically, that they have to pay back within a certain amount of time, or sell the company for a profit within that time, or this whole thing just completely falls apart, right? So I think it's scary. Even if you're working with a private company that has minimal debt, things can go desperately wrong really quickly if a few scenarios fall in place. Business is not linear. Parts pricing is not predictable. And, that's what kind of has happened to a lot of these companies. And the other thing that happens is that private equity gets involved and buys these guys when they look really good. And then a few years down the road, the math just stops mathing and it doesn't make sense anymore. And you're paying way too much of a loan that they used to buy the business in order to make this work anymore, right? So this company will end up, filing for bankruptcy eventually, because nobody's going to buy this business when it's not profitable and it's losing money every single year. So there you go, guys. If you stayed with me through this whole thing, you understand the risk significantly better now of why companies like Advent Tech and many others don't do their own warranty, right? You never see CDW or SHI or Insight or those guys going out there and offering their own branded warranty. Is just because a few years down the road, the numbers look great. 5 years, 10 years down the road, it's terrifying. And things can go wrong and totally reverse the profitability margins on numbers like this really quickly, right? So I hope you learned something. And if you did, then we fulfilled our mission. We educate, we sell tech. We'll see you on the next video.